Right. We started with VPC. We started with the introduction part of virtual private cloud. So by the name itself, we can easily understand. Like we are learning AWS cloud. Okay, we are just trying to understand how the things are going in the AWS cloud. So AWS cloud is a public cloud. Okay, AWS cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, all these are the public clouds. Okay. So everyone can access, everyone can able to create infrastructure. They can able to deploy their applications, okay, in the AWS cloud. But inside the AWS cloud, usually what we will do is like we are going to create our public space. We are going to create our private space inside the AWS cloud. So how we are creating a VPC? VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. So I told you like one example we have understood very clearly how we will be creating our VPC, all these things. So let me give you one more example to understand. So try to understand if this is the AWS cloud. Inside the AWS cloud, we will be having regions like US East 1, US West 1, AP South 1, AP South 1. Like this, we have regions. Inside the region, we will be having availability zones again. If this is the Mumbai region, assume that in the Mumbai region, we'll be having some availability zones like AP South 1A, AP South 1B, like that. Inside the availability zones, we are going to create our VPC. We can create our VPCs. Suppose if I want a private cloud, private space to my project, then I will go ahead. I'll go ahead and I'll create VPC inside the availability zone. Okay, this is how I create VPCs inside the. So while for creating the VPC, what actually is required is for creating the VPC, try to understand. Usually what we are going to do is we are going to create a VPC. Assume that we are going to create a VPC. Inside the VPC, again, we will be creating our subnets. So we cannot say like it's based on the requirement how many subnets we will be creating. Usually it will be like we can differentiate. We can differentiate the subnets as public and private subnets. And we have also understood the example to understand how we are going to create a VPC. For example, the most important thing that you need to understand for creating a VPC is we need to give the IP address range. We need to provide the IP address range. That's the reason why we have taken some examples to understand. If this is how actually we will start with. So this IP address range can be anything. It can start with anything, 10, 20, 30, any number. Okay, it can start with any number. Assume that this is the sample IP address. This is the example IP address that we are taking. So for your VPC, if you require or otherwise, if a particular team requires some 64 IP addresses, 64 servers, okay, if they want to create some 50 servers, as I told you, definitely they will go ahead and create the infrastructure. They will be going ahead and create a VPC. So with a requirement of 64 IPs, usually we cannot create VPC with the exact requirement. Okay, we should reserve some additional IPs. That's the reason why we know how actually we are providing the ranges. If I'm providing 32, only one IP address will be reserved. If I'm providing 31, only two IP addresses will be reserved. Only two or four. How many IP addresses will be reserved if I provide 31?
Two.
Only two, right? 32 minus 31 is 1. 2 to the power of 1 is
1. 2.
So if I provide 30, 4 IP addresses will be reserved. If I provide 29, 29 means 8 IP addresses will be reserved. 28 in the sense
16.
16. If I provide 27,
32.
32. If I provide 26, totally 64 IP addresses will be reserved. Is it correct? So 32 minus 6, 32
Yes.
minus 26, it is 2 to the power of 6 is 64. Okay. So this is how we need to calculate. We need to subtract your range. So whatever the range that you are providing here, you need to subtract from the maximum value of 32. So 32 minus 26 is equal to 6. So again, you need to calculate that as 2 to the power of 6. Okay. 2 to the power of 6. This is how we calculate. 2 to the power of 6 is 64. I think. Okay. 64 IP addresses we will get. So let's go ahead and create a VPC. How we are going to create a VPC? So in the I'm just trying to log in. So I've already logged into my AWS account, and you can see here you can search for the services in the alphabetical order. Otherwise, you can go to search bar and search for VPC. You can see a service name like this, VPC Isolated Cloud Resources. So just go to the VPC. This is how actually the dashboard looks like. You can see now we are in the region of North. We are in the region of N Virginia. We are in the region of N Virginia. If you want to switch to some different region, you can switch to some other region. Okay, I'm just trying to switch to Mumbai region. Okay, I would like to create a VPC in the Mumbai region. That's the reason why I would like to create my infrastructure. Okay, I want to have my private cloud in the Mumbai region. That's why I'm switching to the Mumbai region. And I would like to create a VPC here. This is the VPC dashboard. This is how the VPC dashboard looks like. The very first thing is like I am going to your VPCs. I don't have any VPCs for now. See, whenever you go to VPCs, you will see some default things. Okay, you will see some default things. Don't disturb the default things. Okay, even if you try to delete these things also, they won't get deleted. But don't disturb the default things. These are the default VPCs. Okay. See, whenever you see if we are creating some servers, right? That time we are selecting default VPC. So the servers are being created in the default VPCs. Okay. So these VPCs are for that purpose. Don't disturb the default VPCs. This is not our VPC. This is the default VPC. By default, in each and every region, there will be one default VPC. Don't disturb them. Okay. We'll be having default VPCs, default subnets, all the networking components, all the default networking components we'll be discussing now. Don't disturb the default things. Go ahead and create a new thing. Okay, I'm going to create a VPC. You can see here, I am going ahead and create a VPC. I'm just clicking on create VPC. For now, I would like to create VPC only. I'm just providing the name of the VPC as my VPC. I'm providing the name of my VPC as my VPC. See, whenever I'm trying to create a VPC, the most important thing that it is asking is IP address range, which is also called as CIDR range. What is the CIDR? This is what I'm talking about. Okay, this is what the CIDR range is. CIDR stands for classless interdomain range. So based on this range, the number of IP addresses will be reserved for your VPC. IP addresses will be reserved based on this range you are providing. You are providing this range. It means you want to reserve some 64 IPs for your VPC. So I would like to provide the same range here. What I'm doing is 10 dot. This is an example. Okay, you can start with 20 also, 11 also, 12 also. You can start with 1 also. Okay, it's up to you. I'm starting with 10.0.0.0 slash. I'm giving 26. Okay, I'm going ahead and create 26. You know, if I'm giving 26, we will be getting 64 IPs. So this is the only thing that I'm providing. I'm coming down. I would like to create a VPC for now. Okay. Don't try to understand all the things at a time. But what I'm doing is I'm giving only VPC name. I am providing the range of the VPC so that the VPC will be created. We have successfully created our VPC. Just I provided the name of the VPC as well as the range of the IP address, CIDR range. Usually we call it as CIDR range, CIDR range. So what is the range we provided? You can see here. I'm just going for the details of my VPC. This is the name of the VPC I provided, my VPC. I'm just going inside. I'm trying to understand like whether this is the range I provided or not. Yes, this is the range I provided for my VPC. Okay. So for now it will reserve. Okay. With this VPC, we will get some 64 IP addresses. Okay. Okay, fine. Now, when we can see those IP addresses, usually our IP address will start with this one, 10.0.0 something. Okay, and your range is like this 26. Your first IP address will be this one. Second IP address will be 10.0.0.1, 2, 3, and so on. If it is 64 IP addresses, what will be the last IP address that we get?
63.
63 will be the last IP address. Okay, fine. So now what I'm trying to say is once after creating a VPC, I would like to create a subnet. I would like to create a subnet. What is the purpose of subnet? Why I am going to create a subnet? So this is a VPC. Assume that this is a VPC. Inside the VPC, I'll be creating different subnets usually. What is the purpose of creating subnets? Let me tell you, let me explain you what is the purpose of creating different subnets. Usually what happens is, you can see here. So we are creating a private cloud. Leave about the example, okay? You might take any of the range. If this is the range you take, if you are taking 16, okay, for your private cloud, if you want to create a private cloud, and if you want to assign IP range of this one, 16, you know how many IP addresses you will get? 65,536. Okay, 65,536. We cannot create more than this. We cannot create more than this number of machines in our private cloud. That's the reason why we'll be having only. So we should not give more than this one. This is the final range that we should provide. We should start from 32. Okay, if you want 4, you can provide 31. Okay, like that. Based on your requirement, you will be reducing the number. Finally, what is the maximum value that what is the minimum number that you can provide here is 16. The minimum value that you can provide here is 16, and the maximum value that you can provide is what? The minimum value that you can provide is 16. Maximum value you can provide is
32.
32. That's what you need to understand. Okay. So the higher the number is, you will get the lower number of IP addresses. The lower the number is, you will get higher number of IP addresses. I told you the logic. So far, we understood the logic only. Okay. The reason behind this 2 to the power of 16 is 65,536. We will get, okay. We will be reserving 65,536 IP addresses if I am providing the range of 16. And we cannot create more than 65,536 servers in one VPC. That's the reason why that is the highest range. Okay. So now let's understand why we need subnets. Why we need subnets. Okay. We need to understand like why we need subnets. You know, we will be creating different types of servers. Why we are reserving these many IP addresses? Why we are reserving these many IP addresses? I want to create some servers. Maybe we need to create some servers, or the team required to create servers. So usually what kind of servers we will create? Okay, some based on the requirement, we might create web servers. Based on the requirement, we might create application servers. We might create database servers. You know, web server will be there. What is web server? Usually everyone in the world. Okay, if we want to give public access, usually that will be called as web server. What is web server? If our web application is running and if everyone from the outside is accessing our web application, usually from where they will access from web server. So what I'm trying to say here is we'll be having different types of servers. We'll be having web server, we'll be having application servers, database servers, all these things. So let's take an example of, okay, let's take an example to understand like why we are creating subnets. Assume that I am going to create 2 subnets here. One is public subnet. Okay, I'm going to create 2 subnets. One is public subnet. The other one is private subnet. One is public subnet. The other one is private subnet. We can keep the name of the subnets as we like. It's not mandatory to name the subnet as public or private, but actually we can differentiate the subnets as public and private. What do you mean by public subnet? Suppose if I create any server in this public subnet, okay. Remember one thing, if you create a VPC, you cannot directly create servers in the VPC. Okay. Once we create a VPC, we cannot directly dump all our servers in the VPC. We cannot create all our servers in the VPC. We need to create subnets. What is the next step? Once after creating VPC, we need to create subnets. And the types of subnets that we create is mostly like public subnet and private subnet. What is the use of public subnet? Suppose, for example, my requirement is like I'm having a web server, and this server will be accessible by the public from the outside. Assume this server must be accessible by the public from the outside. So if you would like to provide public access, usually we create those servers in public subnet. Okay, if anyone in the world, okay, if anyone in the world wants to access, if public wants to access this particular server, usually we create such kind of servers in the public subnet for the servers where we would like to provide the public access. And what about private subnet? We have some database servers. We have DB servers. Usually, we won't provide direct access to the public. We won't provide the access to the DB servers to the public directly. Okay, so we won't provide the DB servers access to the public directly. Maybe like suppose if an user is sending, if you are sending any request from the browser, usually what happens? If you are sending any request from the browser, let me explain you from the outside. Okay, if we are sending any request from the browser, the request will goes to the web server. Usually the request will be going to the web server. And from the web server, if it wants to fetch any data from the web server, it will fetches the data from the DB server. Okay. If it requires to fetch the data, usually it will fetch the data from DB server. So in this scenario, you try to understand that we don't need to provide public access for the database servers. Okay, someone is accessing from the browser, the request will go to the web server. So we should provide public access to the web servers. And the same request will be reaching to the database server to get the data, to fetch the data. And the response is going to the web server. From the web server, the user will get the responses. So in this scenario, we don't need to provide public access to the database servers. We want the database, we want our data to be, we want our servers to be safe and secure. That's the reason why we decided to keep all our servers in the private subnet, except some servers like web servers where we need to provide public access. Definitely here we should provide public access. Why? Because if we do not provide public access, public cannot able to access this. That's the reason why such kind of servers will be created in public subnet. The other servers like database and other servers where they do not require to be accessed by the public, then we will be keeping them inside private subnet. Hope you understood the difference between public subnet and private subnet, why we are creating partitions, why we are going for partitions inside the VPC. Let me show you. So for creating a VPC also, we need to, for creating subnet, okay, we know for creating a VPC, we have selected the range. This is the range that we have given for the VPC. For creating subnet also, let's assume that I'm going to give the range for public subnet and private subnet. So I have two subnets. I'm going to create two subnets in the VPC. What I'm doing is just assume that if I am having some 64 IPs for my VPC, if I have reserved 64 IPs for my VPC, I will be dividing this into 32 and 32. Okay. So this is not the mandatory scenario. I'm just taking taking an example and trying to explain you like how actually we create the subnets. If my VPC is having 64 IPs, then I would like to create two subnets. I'll be dividing each subnet with 32 IP addresses. Each subnet with 32 IP addresses. So can you tell me, Chandrakant, now, this is our VPC range, okay? I would like to create a subnet. So what I'm doing is, my subnet, okay, my public subnet, I'm going to create a public subnet first. I'm going to create subnet 1. So usually we cannot say the subnet is public or private. We need to change some settings later. We need to, after creating the subnet, okay, usually first we will create the subnets. Then we will change some settings to make the subnet as public or to make the subnet as private. But for understanding purpose, I'm just trying to explain in this way. Try to explain that I'm going to create one subnet first. The first subnet I'm creating. Okay. And I'm going to create the second subnet also. But the range you should be very careful. Understanding the range is very much important here. So I have 64 IPs. I would like to provide 32 IP address for the first subnet, 32 IP addresses for the second subnet. So I'm starting with this IP address. Why? Because my VPC is starting with my VPC range. I have provided the range with this. So my first subnet will start with this one. And here you need to reduce this number to
27.
27. Why? Because
64 IPs we will get. And
64 IP addresses. So from 0/27. Okay, it starts from 0. It starts from 0. And the subnet range I'm providing is 27. So 2 to the power of 5 is 32. So 32 IP addresses will be reserved for this one.
public subnets.
So I'm going to give the same number for the second subnet also, remaining 32. But here the number will differ. You know, it is the first subnet is starting from 0. So you can understand now how many IP addresses it has occupied. 0 to, it has occupied the IP addresses from 0 to what? 31.
But one.
So your second subnet range must start from 31/27. You see here, what I'm trying to say here is, for my subnet 1, the starting IP address will be this one, and ending IP address will be 31. For my second subnet, the starting IP address will be 31, and ending IP address will be, you can now understand, it starts from
60,
32. Okay, sorry.
32 to
You
65
need to
actually.
provide 32 here, okay? Why? Because it ends from 0, it starts from 0 to 0 and it ends with 31. So we need to start 32 to
65.
63. Why?
Okay,
Because it's
63.
starting with
Yes,
0,
yes.
right?
Yes, yes.
That's the reason why the second subnet will be having the IP addresses from 32 to 63. You know, right? The series, the
Yes,
starting
yes.
series is this one, 10.0.0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, 31. The second subnet IP addresses will be 10.0.0, 32, 10.0.0.33, 10.0.0.34, and so on, 10.0.0 slash
6.
10.0.0.63. That will be the final IP address. So this is how actually we create subnets. Let me show you. We'll go to the interface. We'll go to the dashboard of VPC. I've created a VPC. You can look after here. You can check here. I'm going to your VPCs. I'm able to see two VPCs here. One is default. Please ignore the default VPC. Why? Because we have already understood the purpose of default VPC. You don't need to consider the default VPC and don't delete it. Don't make any changes. Please go for my VPC. You have created one VPC and you know that this is the range that you have provided for your VPC. Now I'm going to create a subnet. On the left navigation, you can see here, I'm just trying to click on subnets. Please create a subnet now. And you see, when you go to the subnets also, I already have 3 default subnets here. How can I know? How can I know the subnets are default or not? You'll see something like here, default subnet. Yes, all these are the default subnets. Don't make any changes on these things. If you are creating any subnet, click on create subnet. See, immediately it is asking you, see, when you are creating a subnet, it is asking in which VPC you want to create. Try to understand, without VPC, you cannot create a subnet. We always make partitions inside the VPC. VPC itself is a partition. VPC is a private cloud. VPC is a private cloud inside the availability zone. VPC is a private zone, our private cloud inside the AWS cloud. Again, inside the VPC, we are again making some partitions. They are called subnets. Subnet is nothing but a partition inside the VPC. So you need to select the VPC, under which VPC you want to create subnets. I'm selecting my VPC. So immediately it is showing that this is the range I have provided. This is the CIDR range that I have provided for my VPC. And I would like to create a subnet under this VPC. So I would like to provide the name of the subnet as. So usually we will not give the names of the subnets as public or private. You can create subnet 1, subnet 2, or otherwise you can also create public or private subnet. Different names we used to give. For understanding purpose, I'm trying to give the name of the subnet as public here. The first subnet name as public. It is clearly asking in which availability zone choose the zone in which your subnet will reside. You have some preferences. You have AP South 1A, AP South 1B, AP South 1C. Okay, you got it right. We have 3 availability zones. If you can select in which availability zone you would like to create your, you can select your availability zone. This is my VPC range I have provided. And you can see here what is the availability zone that I have selected. AP South 1A. So usually in the regions, in the Mumbai region, we have partitions. We have infrastructure in AP South 1A, AP South 1B, and AP South 1C. It is asking in which availability zone you would like to create your subnets. I would like to create my subnet in AP South 1A for now. The range it is asking, I'm giving the range as 10.0.0/27. When you see here, when I'm keeping 28, how many IPs it is showing? Can you see here, when I'm giving this particular range, it is clearly showing how many IP addresses are we going to get?
16.
Still, when I'm keeping 27,
32
we're
IPs.
getting 32 IPs. So this is how actually you need to provide the range for CIDR for the subnet. I'm going ahead and creating a subnet. That's it. You don't need to do much. I'm creating a subnet. If you do not provide the correct CIDR range, it won't create the subnet. So for now, I have created a subnet. One subnet I have created. Let me create another subnet also. I'm going to create another subnet in the same VPC called my VPC. This is the IP address range for the VPC. I'm going to create another subnet. The name of the subnet I'm creating is private subnet. Availability zone, the same availability zone I'm selecting. And I would like to see whenever I'm selecting VPC here, it is clearly showing you are going to create your VPC. Okay, this is the CIDR range you need. This is the CIDR range for your VPC. /26 is the CIDR range for your VPC. And I'm going to give, you see here, when I'm trying to give from 32. So my ending IP address in subnet 1 is what? My ending IP address in subnet 1. I have shown you, right? This is subnet 1.
31.
Ending IP address is 31. And what I'm assuming is like my second subnet might start from 32 and then it can end with 63. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give 33 here. Instead of 32, I am giving 33. And I'm also giving the range as 27. So it is actually, usually, okay. Let me give you some higher range here. I would like to create 26. Okay. You can see here, this is my VPC and this is not the correct range for my second subnet. When I'm trying to create a subnet, what it is showing? What it is showing?
Overlap.
CIDR address overlaps with the existing CIDR. Okay, your CIDR address overlaps with the existing CIDR. Meaning, so you have already selected, you have 64 IPs only. 32 IP addresses are already reserved.
Hmm.
You need to provide the exact range. It will start from 32. Okay. When
27.
and if I try to create a subnet, it won't get created. Why? Because the range you are providing is 26. We don't have enough 64 IPs. Are you getting my point?
Yes.
We have only 32 IPs. You need to provide 27 as the range. Okay, then you can create the subnet now. 2 subnets I have created. One is public subnet, the other one is private subnet. Okay, so these are the very basic things that you should know in the networking part. If you know the VPC, this is the main service in the AWS cloud. If you know the VPC, if you understand the VPC concept well, okay, you can give the suggestions to the team like, if this is the requirement, we can go ahead and create this many IP addresses, this many servers. For this many servers, we can go ahead and create this many IPs. Like that, you can provide the suggestions. Okay. So this is how we create the subnets inside the VPC. Can you see? I'm just going ahead and opening I would like to see the details of the public subnet. I'm just opening the public subnet and see the details of this public subnet. Can you see now what is the range that is assigned here? How many IP addresses are available? I'm just going ahead. This is the range I have provided for sure. I know this is the range I have provided. It starts from 0 and totally the range is 27. 27 means 32 minus 27 is what?
5,
5 to the
30,
power of 5 is
32.
32. Totally 32 IP addresses should be there. But you can see here one interesting thing. It is showing like we have only 27 available IP addresses. 27 IP addresses are only available. Usually we should get 32, right? We
You
should
may be
get
sure.
32. But 27, it is showing like only 27 IP addresses are available. What is the reason?
Few are reserved for other resources also already.
Yes. So there is a concept of reserved IP addresses. Whenever you create a subnet, okay? Whenever you create a subnet, you will see there will be some reserved IP addresses in the AWS. Whenever you create a subnet, totally 5 IP addresses will be reserved. You know the 5 IP addresses? You see, for example, if you are creating a subnet with this range, if your IP address is starting like this, 10.0.0/24 something, can you calculate? /24 means how many IP addresses they'll get?
2 to the
Slash
power
20,
of 8.
2 to the power of 32 minus 24.
8 to the power
8
of
to the
8.
power of 8 means 256, I think.
Yes, yes.
256 IP addresses we will get, okay? See, whatever the subnet you create, if you go for creating a subnet in each and every subnet, I'm talking about subnet level. I'm talking about subnet level, not the VPC level. And in the beginning itself, I told you, whenever you suggest the team, whenever you suggest or whenever you create a VPC for this many number of servers, for some 50 servers and all, I recommended to go ahead and reserve some additional IPs. You remember?
Yes, yes.
Why? Because why I asked you to reserve some additional IPs because if you create a subnet, you cannot use all the IP addresses. You cannot use all the IP addresses reserved for the subnet. In our case itself, in our example itself, you are trying to understand. We reserve, this is the IP address range I have provided for my subnet. Totally, I should get
32.
32 IP addresses, but it is clearly showing that we have only 27, meaning 5 IP addresses are reserved in each and every subnet. Even though you create a higher range, every subnet, it's not based on the range. In every subnet you are creating, 5 IP addresses will be reserved. And if you want to know the reason of why those IP addresses are reserved, why we cannot use those 5 IP addresses, particularly the first 4 and the last one. The first 4, meaning in the subnet level, if this is the range I provided, what are the first 4 IP addresses that are reserved for this range?
10.0.0,
0.0 is reserved,
1,
0.1 is reserved,
2, and 3.
0.2 is reserved, and 0.3 is also reserved. We cannot use. These are for AWS maintenance purpose. These are internally reserved for the AWS maintenance purpose. We cannot use these IP addresses for our servers. And there is one more last IP.
255.
In our example, if there are 32 IP addresses, the last one is what? 31.
63.
For this subnet, the starting IP address is 0. The last IP address will be
63.
31.
No,
31.
31. For 31. Yes.
So what I'm trying to say is for at each subnet level, 5 IP addresses will be reserved and we cannot use 5 IP addresses. It is not at the VPC level. Don't think at the VPC level. At each subnet level, 5 IP addresses are reserved. You cannot use 5 IP addresses in each and every subnet. And try to understand now. Consider your requirement is very, very less. And you want to provision some 10 servers. If you want to provision some 10 servers, if you create a VPC with some 16 IPs and all, is it possible to assign IP addresses for all your servers? No. Why? Because your subnet itself will, if you create a subnet, in the subnet itself, 5 IP addresses are reserved. If you
Yes.
create some 16 IP subnet, if you create a 16 IP subnet, Consider your subnet is having 16 IPs. In those 16 IPs, how many IP addresses we cannot use?
4.
Five. Totally five. At each subnet level, we cannot use 5 IP addresses. The first 4 and the last IP. You able to
Yes.
understand the first 4 IP addresses
Yes.
and the last IP. We cannot use these 5. You can see here in the documentation very clearly. All these are reserved. The first 4 IP addresses and the last IP address, they are reserved for different purposes. If you want to know, the first IP address is reserved for the network address. The second IP is reserved for AWS for the VPC router. The second one is reserved for VPC router. The third one is reserved for DNS server. Okay, the fourth one is reserved for the future purpose. The last one is reserved for network broadcast address. Okay, so there are different reasons. The 5 IP addresses are reserved for subnet level. At a subnet level, all the 5 IP addresses are reserved. We cannot use. So that's the reason why I would like to show you this example. And you can see here now very clearly, I'm showing you the subnet. This is our subnet, first subnet. 32 IP addresses should be there. I have only 27 now. Let me go to the another subnet also, private subnet. Go to the private subnet, open and see what is the range you have provided. This is the range I have provided for the second subnet. Am I going fast? I think
No.
I'm keep repeating the things. I don't think I'm going fast. If I'm going stop, please stop me and ask if you have any questions, okay? IPv4 range that I have provided for this private subnet is this one. And here also it is showing clearly how many IP addresses are available.
27.
7. I have reserved for AWS internal management purpose. Done. We are done with creating VPC. We understood how to create VPC and how to create subnet inside the VPC. And we also understood about the reserved IP addresses at the subnet level. Now, what we can do is let's understand what is a public subnet and what is private subnet. By default, when you create a subnet, just by giving the name of the subnet as public, the subnet won't become public. Okay? Just by giving the name of the subnet, this is our purpose. Okay? This is for our purpose only. We can edit the names and we can edit the names and we can make the names as like this. I'm just naming the subnet one as I'm just naming the first subnet as subnet 1. I would like to name the second subnet as subnet 2. My plan is I want to provision some servers in subnet 1. I want to provision some servers in subnet 2. Okay. And whatever the servers, for whichever the servers I am going to provide the public access, I will be provisioning them in the subnet 1. For whichever the servers I am not going to provision the public access, I want to keep the private. I want to keep them as private servers. I am provisioning them inside the subnet 2. So here is the case that you need to understand what is public and private subnet. By default, the subnet is private only. When you create a subnet, the default nature of the subnet is private only. You need to make it as public. We need to make the subnet as public. How can we make the subnet as public? Let me show you. It is a two-step
Provide internet access.
process. Yes. Yeah. Okay. You can see here it is a two-step process. How can we go ahead? Every subnet will be by default what? Every subnet will be by default private. And if we want to make any subnet as public, okay, what we need to do is we need to enable, okay, to make the subnet as public, it is a two-step process. We need to enable the public IP and we need to provide internet gateway. We need to attach an internet gateway to the VPC. Okay, this is how actually what we do to make the subnet as public. We follow these steps. Let me show you how we are going to make the subnet as public. Let's make the subnet 1 as public. Okay. By default, both the subnets are private only. Whenever you create a subnet, see, for both the subnets, we followed the same settings only. We did not make any changes in the settings. Okay. The same procedure only we followed while creating the subnet. By default, the nature of the subnet is private. If we wanted to make the subnet as public, what we need to do is we need to enable the public IP of the subnet. Select the subnet. Okay. Go to the actions. Here you will see something like edit subnet settings. Edit subnet settings. You will see something like edit subnet settings. By default, you can see here, auto assign public IP will be disabled. If you want to make the subnet as public, enable the auto assign public IP. Anyone can tell me what is the reason why we are enabling this auto assign public IP. I'll show you the difference later. For now, try to understand how to make the subnet as public. We need to edit the subnet settings. We need to enable auto assign IP public IP address. Auto assign public IP address. Select this option. Come down, save this. That's it. The first step is over. So we are making the subnet as public. We edited the subnet settings and we enabled the auto assign public IP. Now I'm going one more step. What is one more step? You can see here.
Internet gateway.
We need to create an internet gateway. You know what is the purpose of internet gateway? What is a component called internet gateway? Why we are learning the new things. Try to understand. We are learning new things. We edited the subnet settings and we have enabled auto assign public IP address. We saved the settings. Okay. So what happens is now with this step, okay, with this step, just now we edited the settings and we enable it, right? What happens is, you can understand now. If I create a server here in the public subnet, public IP will be assigned to that server. If public IP is assigned, then with the help of this public IP, public can able to access this server. Without public IP, public cannot able to access this server. To understand, if you are going to create any servers, not only single server, if you are going to create any of the servers here in the public subnet, okay, usually for a server, if you create a server, how many IP addresses we can see usually? Private IP as well as public IP. Private IP is for internal purpose. So if our project team wants to connect, internally, if we want to access the servers, we can go for private IPs. But if we want to provide public access, if anyone from the outside world wants to access the server, definitely public IP must be enabled. Otherwise, public cannot able to access this server. Now try to understand, if we create any servers in the public subnet, public IPs will be enabled only if the subnet is public. Got it? If the subnet is public, then only the IP addresses will be assigned. Public IPs will be assigned. Private IP will be anyhow there. Public IP will be assigned only if we make the subnet as public. How we are making the subnet as public? We are just selecting the subnet, going to the actions, edit subnet settings. By default, it is disabled. We are enabling the auto assign IPv4. I'm saving it. So from now onwards, if you create any server in subnet 1, the public IP will be enabled. And now you go ahead and create any server in subnet 2. What happens? Public IP will not be
There. Assigned.
Public IP will not be assigned.
Yes.
So that's the reason why we are differentiating that this subnet is public subnet and this subnet is private. Still, we did not apply the complete settings for making the subnet as public. We did only one thing. Okay. Okay. For now, what I'm trying to say is we want to provide internet connection to this one. If there is no internet connection, how the public? Even though if I have the public IP, try to understand here. Even though if I have the public IP, if there is no internet connection enabled, how the public able to access the server? No. Usually, how we are connecting to the servers? How we are connecting to the servers like Amazon? How we are connecting to the servers like Facebook, Google? We are connecting to all these servers because public IP is enabled, and with the help of internet
Internet.
connection. Through the internet,
Yes.
through the browser, through the internet, we are trying to connect to this server. So without internet, we cannot connect to these servers. That's the reason why, if you want to make the subnet as public, make sure that you need to enable the internet connection. How to enable the internet connection? So for providing the internet connection, we have a component called what? Internet gateway. I'm talking about internet gateway now. I already told you, if you go to any of the component here, if you go to any of the components here, there will be some default things. Don't change the default things. Don't think that some internet gateway is already created. No, this internet gateway is what? The default.
Default.
If you want to know whether it is a default one or not, just go ahead into the details and you can see somewhere. You will find somewhere. This is the default one. Don't go for deleting them, all those things. If you want to create, you create a new one. Create an internet gateway. We are now talking about internet gateway. You know what is internet gateway, right? Internet gateway is a component. Why we are creating this internet gateway? We are creating this internet gateway because to
Provide
enable
internet to.
internet
Hmm.
access, to provide internet access. If you want to provide internet access, then definitely we need to create internet gateway. We'll understand slowly. Okay, we will come back to the definitions, all these things later, but let me go ahead and create internet gateway. I am going ahead and creating an internet gateway. Where is this? Yes. Click on internet gateway. This is mainly for providing internet connection. I'm creating an internet gateway. I'm just providing the name of the internet gateway as my internet gateway. It's up to you. You can provide anything, any name. Nothing is here. Okay, it's just asking the name of the internet gateway. That's it. You don't need to provide these tags, all these things. These are optional things. No need to create all these things. Just click on create internet gateway. Very simple. I just created an internet gateway. Okay, I just created this internet gateway. Now, what I would like to do is I need to attach this internet gateway. I would like to attach this internet gateway. Still, you see, the internet gateway is created. This is the internet gateway I created. But what is the status of this internet gateway? This is not attached to. This is not attached. So where
Yes.
we are going to attach? We need to attach the internet gateway to the VPC, not to your subnet. Try to understand. We are creating an internet gateway and we will be attaching that internet gateway to the VPC. Okay. Anyhow, we would like to provide internet connection only to the public subnet. You'll understand all the things later, why we are attaching the internet gateway to the VPC. Try to understand, we have created an internet gateway. I'll be attaching that internet gateway to what? VPC. See, I cannot directly attach. Let me attach this to the VPC first, okay? Let me attach this to the VPC. What I'm doing is I'm selecting this internet gateway, go to the actions, attach to VPC, VPC name, my VPC. I'm just attaching it. I created an internet gateway. I have attached that internet gateway to the VPC. This is the VPC ID. I have attached that internet gateway to the VPC. Okay. Now what happens is this internet gateway is attached to the VPC. What about my subnet? My subnet. I should attach this to the subnet also. Otherwise, I won't get internet connection to the subnet. So what I will do is I cannot attach this internet gateway to the subnet directly. For attaching this internet gateway to the subnet, what I need is I need a component called route table. Do you know what is the purpose of route table? So route table is another component here. I created an internet gateway and attached an internet gateway to the VPC. What I'm doing is now I would like to attach the same internet gateway to my subnet. I would like to attach the internet gateway to the subnet. To attach the internet gateway to the subnet, like what I'm doing is I would like to create a route table. This is the component which will be useful for us to attach our internet gateway to the subnet. I'm creating a route table. Let me go ahead and create a route table. My route table. I'm selecting my VPC. This is the route table I'm creating for within the VPC called my VPC for my VPC. Okay. This VPC, the VPC to use for this route table. Okay. My VPC I've selected. I'm creating a route. I've created a route table, and earlier we have some other route tables also. Those are the default route tables. Ignore all those route tables. You created a route table called my route table. Once you created a route table, are you getting what are the things that we did now so far? Okay. So we cannot attach internet gateway to the subnet. So we created a new route table. We created a route table. Okay. So what I am doing is now we are going to attach this route table to the, okay, let me show you what we are going to do is select the route table, go to the actions. I would like to go for edit subnet associations. The route table, I am attaching it to the subnet one. Got it right? The route table, I am attaching it to the subnet one. And I'm going to see here. We have two subnets. Okay, route table. I have created a route table and attached this route table to the internet gateway. So sorry, I have created a route table. The purpose of this route table is whatever the internet gateway that we have created, that internet gateway, we cannot directly attach to the subnet. That's the reason why we created this route table. So what I'm doing is with the help of this route table, we're going here, we're writing the subnet associations. I connected this route table to the subnet. I connected this route table to the subnet. Any questions still here? Any questions? So let me explain you in a diagrammatic way. Okay, let me explain you in a diagrammatic. If you have any confusions, let me explain you. If you have any diagram in the diagrammatic representation, what we are doing is inside the VPC, I am creating two subnets. By default, the subnets are private. By default, the subnets are private. If I want to make any of the subnet as public, assume that this is subnet 1 and subnet 2. I want to make the subnet 1 as public. Okay. I want to make the subnet 1 as public. What I need to do if I want to make the subnet 1 as public? So first step is what? We need
Enabling, yes.
to edit the subnet and we need to enable public IP. We are done with that, right? So we have edited the subnet. What we are doing, we have edited the subnet and we enable auto assign public IP for this. We have enabled auto IP assigning. Otherwise, the IP addresses, public IP addresses will not be assigned. We have enabled auto IP assigning for the subnet. And the next step is like, we want to provide internet connection. If I want to provide internet connection to the subnet, what I need to do is I would like to create an internet gateway. So I have created an internet gateway and I connected that internet gateway to the VPC first. First, you need to create an internet gateway and connect the internet gateway to the VPC. You know, what is the purpose of internet gateway? Providing
internet to the
providing
subnet.
internet connection to the subnet. If I want to provide internet connection to the subnets, definitely you need to create an internet gateway and connect that internet gateway to the VPC first.
Yes.
Then we cannot connect this internet gateway directly to the subnets. Is it possible?
No.
To connect the internet gateway to the subnet? No, we cannot directly connect that internet gateway to subnet. For that reason, what I'm doing, I'm creating one more component called route table. I'm creating one more component called route table. Now, what I'm doing is one end of the route table, I'm attaching to the subnet. Another end of the route table, I'm connecting it to the, you see here, one end of the route table, I'm attaching to internet gateway. Another end of the route table I am attaching to the subnet. This is what we are doing. So let me go to the route table. You will understand now. You know what is the purpose of route table I have created. The purpose of route table I have created is we cannot directly attach this internet gateway to the subnet. So for that reason, I'm creating a component called route table. One end of the route table is attaching to the subnet. Another end of the route table is attaching to the internet gateway. You got it right?
Yes.
So this is the route table I've created. I selected the route table. Please go to the actions. Okay. So this will not. You need to go for actions, edit subnet associations, select the subnet, save the details. Okay, save the things. And at the same time, you should also go for actions, edit the routes. Here, okay. Here we need to provide, okay. Here we need to provide. We need to edit the routes also. Select this one, select the route table, go to actions. We should also provide edit routes. Yes, it is already there here. Okay. I think while creating the route table itself, we connected it to the internet gateway. Okay. So while creating the route table itself, we connected it to the internet gateway. So now if you go ahead and create any server, okay, if you go ahead and create any server in the public VPC, in the VPC, in the public VPC, in the first subnet, then those servers will assign public IP and those servers can able to access internet connection. Okay, if you create any server in the public VPC, the public subnet, sorry. If you create any server in the public subnet, so those servers will be able to access internet. And if you create any server in the private subnet, those servers will not have public IP and those servers will not be having internet connection. We'll see the difference tomorrow. Any questions you have, you can ask me, we'll discuss. Please practice so that you will understand. Maybe it might take some time to get understand. If you are a beginner, it will definitely take some time to understand all these things. Please review the record. Please go ahead and revise it through the recording or somehow by practicing so that you will understand all the things. Okay. Thank you. Let's meet the other session.
Yeah. Thanks, Vamshi.